In 2015, Australia resettled 11,776 refugees. This video explores some of the challenges refugee students face in the Australian education context.
Do you have any questions? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Anong sinasabi niya?
Nervous system, or the ANS, is made
Anong sinasabi nila?
the parasympathetic system
Ang bilis
and the
naman.
sympathetic system. Now, can anyone tell me the difference between the two?
Anong tinanong niya?
Here is the dictionary.
Hindi ko alam yung sagot. Ano yan? Libro?
Now, the parasympathetic system
Baka makatulong sa akin.
otherwise known as rest and digest.
Hindi ko alam yung sasabihin ko kasi hindi ko alam yung sagot.
Is a dictionary really going to help? In their study of science teaching of refugee students, Miller, Mitchell and Brown found it is not a question of what is the word for chemical bonds in your language. This is a new concept as well as a new word.
Did anyone watch the episode of Grey's Anatomy last night? Channel 7.
Yeah.
You did? Well, Meredith was talking about the fight or flight response, remember?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, that is stimulated by the sympathetic system.
Oh,
so there you go.
Uh-huh.
Bourdieu argues that schools contribute to the reproduction of existing power relations in society by privileging the cultural background of students of the dominant class.
Teaching isn't a one-way flow of knowledge from teachers to students. As teachers, we can definitely learn a lot from our students. So let's get some other perspectives from people who have had experience working with refugees. So, Javier and Hina, what are some of the cultural challenges faced by refugee students in Australian schools?
If they've had no educational experiences at all, they don't know how to behave in a classroom, they don't know what the expectations are, they don't know what the understood rules are, what the understood protocols are, such as raising hands, waiting your turn, being polite, those sorts of things, and they will just barge at a teacher expecting the teacher to attend to their needs beyond and above anybody else's because of the self-centeredness that they may feel that they are entitled to. They can't sit still sometimes for that 40 or 50 minute period and will get up and wander around the classroom. They may be accustomed to being able to eat in the classroom and drink, and all those sorts of issues disturb the classroom practices that the teachers here are used to and then cause difficulties for them. Again, if the teachers are not aware of these differences, they may attribute this to rudeness, being impolite, being inconsiderate, where it may just be the fact that they're either not used to our school system or any school system, or that the school system that they are used to is different to ours and accepts or does not accept different things. So they're in a limbo as to they don't know what the situation here is going to be.
I think another aspect of culture is just the content of the information is communicated a different way. There's different expectations about how you assess materials or how you understand information. There's different kind of fundamental differences, sometimes not completely, between different cultural expectations around study and around what constitutes meaningful learning. And I think one of those factors comes in that for some people, for example, if you come from Syria, you're more likely to have been educated for a long time, whereas perhaps in Afghanistan, where there's been more instability for a longer period, education might not have been something you've consistently experienced. So even for a parent to comprehend the workload for a young person, how homework is relevant, or how they compete with other tasks like family responsibilities, or how important study is to actually learning outcomes. there might not be the same awareness because these are not the skills that were previously needed in, in living your life, which makes a lot of sense. You're not going to dedicate, survival skills to this.
So some of the points that you've mentioned are differences in communication styles, cultural expectations around study, little to no previous educational experiences, lack of knowledge of school routines, example, eating in class or sitting. Behaviour might be misinterpreted as rudeness. So culture and language are inherently connected. A lack of experience in education is related to a lack of language knowledge. So now that we've discussed some of the cultural issues, let's now focus on some of the linguistic issues. So in your opinion, Javier and Hina, is 1 year of intensive English learning sufficient for a refugee student to transition into the mainstream school environment?
Yes and no. There's no one answer that fits all people, as with everything else. For some people, depending on their background, although they're refugees, they might have had a greater opportunity to go to school, so 1 year may be enough for them. For others, it's nowhere near enough. For others, again, no amount of time will be enough, and it's for a variety of reasons. It depends on their level of English when they first come to Australia. They might have studied it in the refugee camp. They may have acted as interpreters for American soldiers or Australian soldiers and have learned a level of English and maybe only having problems with reading and writing, and a year may be enough. The level of education that they will have had access to in their own country. We've had students who've been 16, 17, 18 years old with maybe no education at all. Now, to put them into a year 10 or year 11 class with 1 year of intensive English is not going to be enough. But in that year, as many gaps and as many holes in their education is filled as possible, with then further support is going to be needed in the high school that they attend, so that they've got some degree of success possibility in the HSC if they go that far.
I think 1 year is a very short amount of time to learn a new language. I think a lot of kids still struggle throughout school and even after school, realistically, with grammar and language and different things like that, but it varies for different people. Again, if someone's had a more stable educational experience prior, it's much easier for them to pick up these language skills, especially if they're younger when they come to Australia. Whereas if they're a bit older, then it's much harder. You find even in the same families, there can be difference in the way that they comprehend information or are able to pick up language, and having more time in school to keep building that, or whether your networks are not really that broad so that you only communicate in your most native language you're comfortable with, that you might not learn as quickly. So there's a lot of factors. I think 1 year is too short to meaningfully learn English. People still do an incredible job all the same.
So some of the points you've mentioned are the individual, previous educational experience, ability to adapt to a school environment, previous knowledge in a non-native language, the age of the student, and different ways families communicate with each other. Thanks for these points. But we keep talking about lack, what's missing, deficit and disadvantage. Instead of finishing by focusing on these challenges, what are some of the positive aspects refugee students bring to the classroom? We can definitely learn a lot from our students, so let's explore this in the context of our classroom.
I think having people from refugee backgrounds in the classroom, to one extent, really highlights resilience. How you can cope with different situations, how you can overcome situations. It provides a bit more cross-cultural diversity. People from different language skills, different experiences, they're able to expand the knowledge that we have in the classroom, which I think is really fantastic. Having people from refugee backgrounds in the classroom, I think is also part of equity. Equal access to education, equal access to socially valued resources, ways to connect with the community. If you want future leaders to be educated and empowered, then why not start in the classroom?
This is one story. However, refugees are individuals that come from numerous and diverse cultural backgrounds. Their experiences cannot be homogenized. Stigma is often attached to being a non-native speaker of English. lack of cultural competence in an Australian classroom setting can lead to embarrassment and withdrawal. In a US-based study, Bale found that the differences of refugee students were viewed as deficit. Refugee students were labelled as disabled learners. Instead of perpetuating a deficit approach, it's important to acknowledge the strength and resilience refugees bring. They contribute knowledge and diverse experiences and perspectives to the classroom, which the rest of the class and teachers could also learn from.